Welcome back to another video tutorial brought to you by thevirtualinstructor.com. Today we're going to be doing relief printing. As you can see, I've started off with a simple sketch that I'm going to turn into a relief print. You'll notice a couple things about this drawing. It's simple, first of all. Another thing you'll notice is that I've planned out the areas that I want to be black and the areas that I want to be white. This is exceptionally important in relief printing because you're going to be cutting out the areas that you want to be white and you'll be leaving the areas that you want to be black. Now I've drawn this image with soft graphite, about a 6B pencil, and that's going to help me transfer the image. And I'm going to transfer this image onto my block of linoleum. So I've taken some linoleum and I'm going to adhere this image to the block using tape. Using the soft graphite is going to allow for the graphite to transfer from one surface to the other. Now you'll notice I'm using gray linoleum in this video, although there are other types of linoleum. There's a type of linoleum that's golden, and that golden color will really allow your transferred image to show up. It'll be a little bit harder to see on the gray surface. So once we've got all the tape down, we're ready to go. Then you can take any type of hard material. I'm just going to use my pencil, and I'm going to go across the back and I'm going to cover the whole surface. Now I'm bearing down with pressure. That's what's most important, not necessarily creating the graphite or putting the graphite on the back of that, just the pressure that I'm putting on the back of the paper. That's going to allow the image to transfer from the paper to the linoleum. And then after we've got the entire surface covered, we can take the tape off and see our transferred image. It may be kind of hard to see, but it's there. It's kind of a light version, so because it's so light, I'm going to take ink, and I'm using a water-based ink, and I'm just going to go over all of my lines. I'm going to use pen for the detailed areas, and I'm going to use a marker for the larger areas. It's important that you use a water-based ink that will be able to come off later in the process. So this is a permanent marker, but it's still water-based. And then there's my image after I have covered the entire surface with the ink. And again, it's a water-based permanent marker. This gives me an idea of what my print is going to look like. Now at this point I'm ready to get set up to start cutting, and I'm going to use a linoleum holder, word block holder. It's just going to hold my block in place. It's got a little piece that attaches to the table, and then it's got a little area up here at the top that will hold my block in place. So I can put that right on the table, and I can put my block right up in the corner. This will allow me to make cuts away from my body, and it'll make it a little bit safer. So now I'm going to take my gouge, and this is a gouge. This is a very small, fine bladed gouge, and the blades are interchangeable. I'm going to hold my gouge like so in the palm of my hand, and then I don't want to put my hands up there because I could slip and cut them. So I'm going to make sure that my hands are behind where I'm cutting with the gouge, and then I'm going to cut into the linoleum in the areas that I want to be white, and I'm going to cut away from my body. Now this particular linoleum that I'm using is gray on the surface, but underneath it is black. That's going to allow me to know where I've made my cuts. So I know I need to cut everything that's gray until all I see is black. Now as you're cutting, make sure that you think about the lines that you are creating. Since linoleum is a little bit more sensitive than a wood block, you need to be conscious of the marks that you're making. If you go too deeply, you could cut through the linoleum. If you're not using a piece like I'm using, I have a wood block on the back. But if you're using just straight linoleum with no wood block, it'd be easy to cut through the surface, so you have to be careful of that. You also have to make sure that you don't cut yourself. So keep that in mind. Make sure that you're making cuts away from your body. If the linoleum is hard to cut, you may find that it might be easy to heat it up with an iron. When the linoleum's a little warmer, it makes it a little easier to cut. Another thing to keep in mind is if you're concerned if your composition isn't just right or maybe your drawing's not just right, it's better to leave areas and then cut them later after you make a print than to go ahead and cut them. Can't replace linoleum that you have cut off. That's why the planning stage is so important. Alright, gouges come in different sizes. The blades on the gouges come in different sizes. The one I was just cutting with was a number 1, and the one here that I'm getting ready to cut with I believe is a number 3, and it's got a U-shaped bottom, and it will allow you to cut more of the linoleum out at one time. You can see the piece I just cut out was a little larger than what I'd been cutting out before. It's a little harder to cut with, so it requires a little bit more force, but again the trade-off is cutting more of the linoleum off. Alright, so you'll take some time and you'll cut off all the areas that you want to be white, and then I went ahead and washed my surface, and I washed all the ink off, and what it left me with is kind of a inverse of what my print's going to look like. Those dark areas are the areas that I've cut out, and the areas that are gray are actually the areas that are raised. These are the areas that are going to accept the ink in just a moment. Alright, so we'll take the linoleum and put it out of the way. And I'm going to take a sheet of plexiglass to put my ink on. Now we're using a water-soluble block printing ink, and what I'll do is I'll just take a bead of it and go right across my plexiglass. And this ink is tacky, and it is dependent on getting enough ink on the surface, but you don't want too much right off the bat. So we're going to take our brayer, it's this little roller device, and I'm going to pull down a little bit of the ink at a time. If you pull down too much and put too much ink onto the print, you'll have to wash your block and start over. So I'm just going to pull down a little bit, and then I'm going to move it around in different directions until I've got a good application of the ink onto the brayer. Then I can take my block, and with the brayer I can start rolling on the ink. Now you'll notice the whole surface will turn black, because just to remind you, this linoleum shows up black once you've cut into it. Not all of it is that way. And you want to make sure that you cover the surface entirely and completely until you get that same tacky feeling on the block as you got on the plexiglass when you were spreading your ink around. I'm going to take this piece of paper out from underneath it, it has ink on it, and then we're going to lay our sheet of paper that we want to print on top. Next I'm going to take a tool called a baren, and I'm going to apply pressure to the top part of the paper. This is called burnishing. You can also use a tool like as simple as a wooden spoon to do this, or if you have a printing press you can run this through a printing press. And I'm just applying even pressure, kind of a circular motion onto the paper, which is transferring the ink from the linoleum to the paper. So then you'll just pull back the paper at the corner, and you want to pull it back gently at even speed. And then you can take a look at what your print looks like, and it might take you 2 or 3 attempts to get a good print from this. You can also touch it up with a little bit of the extra ink that's left on your plexiglass. But I want to show you the block so you can see what the inverse image looks like. So we've got our print, and here's our block, and I've washed it off. And you can see what our piece of linoleum looks like compared to the finished print. And that's it. That's linoleum block printing. I hope you have enjoyed this video tutorial brought to you by thevirtualinstructor.com.